Next to Wisconsin for a debate between incumbent Governor Scott Walker and Tony Evers, superintendent of Wisconsin Public Schools. Governor Walker is a Republican and seeking a third term. You're watching live campaign 2018 debate coverage on C-SPAN 2.
In Madison, the Wisconsin Broadcasters Association Foundation presents the 2018 gubernatorial debate with incumbent Republican Governor Scott Walker and Democratic challenger Tony Evers. Now, here's WBA Foundation President and CEO Michelle Vetterkind.
Good evening. The Wisconsin Broadcasters Association and its member radio and television stations are pleased to welcome you to this gubernatorial debate between the race's two leading candidates, Governor Scott Walker and State Superintendent Tony Evers. Tonight's event originates from WMTV NBC 15 in Madison, the home of Wisconsin's beautiful state capital. Tonight's debate continues the WBA's long-standing commitment to excellence and public service. The debate is underwritten by the WBA Foundation and supported by a grant from the Wisconsin Association of Independent Colleges and Universities. Let's go now to our moderator, a veteran Wisconsin broadcaster, member of the WBA Hall of Fame, and professor of leadership and media integrity at Loyola University Chicago, Jill Geisler.
We are 18 days away from Election Day. On Tuesday, November 6th, voters decide who will be their governor for the next 4 years. Our goal tonight is to help Wisconsin voters make informed choices as the two major party candidates, incumbent Governor Scott Walker and State School Superintendent Tony Evers, meet in their first debate. The candidates have agreed to the rules. We will be clear on the time allotted for replies. We start with 90-second replies, then move to questions with 1-minute replies, and then finally a few with 30-second responses. The candidates and I can see countdown clocks. When they hit their time limit, I will advise them, and if they continue, I'll note it, and their microphone will cease to work, and we'll go on to the next question. Finally, if a candidate fails to answer the precise question asked of them, I will exercise the moderator's option to call that out and give them just 30 seconds to give a specific answer. There will be 2-minute closing statements. The order of the closings and the first question was determined by a coin toss. With that, let's begin with the first question going to Governor Walker and asked by Jessica Arp of WISC TV.
Thank you both for being here tonight. We start tonight with credibility. Governor Walker, as of this week, 4 of your former cabinet secretaries have publicly criticized you. Your former transportation secretary says you're inaccurate about state highways. Secretaries of financial institutions, corrections, and economic development say they initially believed in your vision for the state, but described your leadership with terms like schemes and cover-up and, quote, micromanagement, manipulation, and mischief, including directives not to leave a paper trail on major decisions. How does the fact that 4 of your appointees are raising these allegations affect your credibility?
Well, thanks for the question. And first off, I want to say it's a good evening, and it's a little bit hard for me to imagine being here tonight without my father in the audience. So I want to begin by thanking so many of you who have offered your condolences, including you, Tony. Thank you very much for that. 8 years ago, Tonette and I were worried that our kids weren't going to be able to find a job, let alone a career. It's because the unemployment rate was 9.3%. And since then, we've seen a tremendous turnaround. More people are working in the state than ever before, which is why we're working on workforce. And over the next 4 years, I'd like to continue to grow that and keep our graduates here. But Jessica, to your specific question, it's simple. I'm not afraid to have people with diverse opinions in my cabinet. For years, I had a cabinet member who wanted to raise the gas tax, and I told the voters clearly I would never raise the gas tax without an equal or greater reduction elsewhere in their tax burden overall. Even in addition to my cabinet, when I was in county government, I had a member of the cabinet there who worked for a Democrat in United States Congress, and I even had a personal aide in the past who worked for Joe Lieberman, who was a running mate with Al Gore when he ran for president in 2000. I'm not afraid to have people with diverse opinions out there, but what I always will do is be straight with the voters of the state of Wisconsin. I'll tell you what I'm going to do, and then I'll follow up and do it. And I hope you can see, based upon our record, we've got more people working in this state than ever before, some of the best schools in the nation, and your property taxes are lower today than before you started.
Thank you, Governor. Your response to that, Mr. Evers.
And thank you very much. And thanks to the Wisconsin Broadcasters Association and the folks here tonight asking the questions. And also, in particular, the viewers watching tonight, and go Brewers, let's not forget about that. So it's a great question around that we've seen playing out over the last few days. And Governor Walker talks about diversity, but I look at this in a little different way, and that is, it's about how you govern and how the people of Wisconsin trust you. When you have 4 of your top lieutenants, and you hired them, Scott Walker, and they're talking about things like, you know, alluding to not being truthful, making sure that that transparency was not an issue, hiding things from the media, making sure that there was lack of integrity in state government. And the bottom line is, and this is the thing that I think is most important, time and time again in this discussion that we saw today, we saw people that were your closest attendants and advisors saying that the integrity thing was very important, but you put your political agenda ahead of the people of Wisconsin. Now that is something that frankly is very frightening to me as a citizen, and I will change that going forward. In fact, I can't imagine another governor that has
Thank you, Mr. Evers. You're out of time. We're going to go to the next question, and that is to Emilee Fannon of WKOW.
Keeping the focus on credibility. Mr. Evers, Politico reported today, and your Department of Public Instruction confirmed, that 4 passages in your recently submitted department budget were plagiarized. The sections include 15 paragraphs that have been lifted from a blog post and other paragraphs that were taken from a Wikipedia entry without attribution. You've been a lifelong educator, and your own Department of Public Instruction website warns about the dangers of plagiarism. Just as we asked Governor Walker, what does it say about your credibility that this would happen under your watch?
Well, if this is the best Scott Walker has, he doesn't have much, I'll tell you that. We dropped a few citations from the back pages of a budget. We talked to the people involved. It was a mistake, and they fixed it. Now, the last thing I need in my life is to have Scott Walker lecturing me about the issue of plagiarism, frankly. He takes budget items directly from national organizations and high dollar sponsors, passes them into law without barely changing a word. The issue about my budget is this. It is going to ask for $1.4 billion extra for the kids of Wisconsin. That's what's important to me, not citations. That $1.4 billion is what we're going to be used to take care of the $800 million that Scott Walker took out of the budget just a handful of years ago. That is what this budget is about. We can be diverted into talking about citations all night, but at the end of the day, we know the kids of Wisconsin need a better budget than we've had for the last 8 years.
Thank you, Governor Walker. Your response?
Sure. Well, first off, on the previous point, let me be clear. The Wisconsin Council for Freedom of Information actually gave us an award for open government. In fact, you can literally go to our website, Open Book, and see all the finances to state government. And one of the national organizations gave us an A ranking, ranking us the number 3 state in the nation for openness and transparency. But to the issue that was just raised in that question specifically, I don't know of a teacher out there that would allow a student to hand in a term paper that plagiarized major portions of a document without attributing it, particularly from Wikipedia out there. But that aside, let's talk about one thing I'm happy to copy, and that is my friend Tommy Thompson. You know, years ago when I served in the legislature, when Tommy was our governor, we funded schools at 2/3. Jim Dole got rid of that. We funded schools at 2/3, and we still lowered property taxes. In this last budget, we made the largest actual dollar investment in education in state history. In fact, Tony actually called it a pro-kid budget. He told the media at the time that his priorities were aligned with my priorities. At least that's what he told them when he was running for his 3rd term for state superintendent. He's running for a different office, but the facts haven't changed. Our budget invests record amounts, an extra $200 for every year for every student in every district across the state. And we go up to $400 on top of that for kids in rural school districts. Yeah, we're focused on improving education, but we're doing it without raising property taxes. Tony Evers, for years, has advocated raising your property taxes. I'll fund 2/3 funding and still continue to lower property taxes with good fiscal management and reform.
All right, let's go to the next question, and that goes to Leigh Mills of WMTV.
Good evening, gentlemen. And I'm glad, Governor, you brought that up, because let's talk a little bit more about education, specifically as it relates to taxes. In the 5 Marquette Law School polls taken this year, a majority of likely voters, at sometimes as many as 63%, want to increase spending on public schools instead of reducing property taxes. On social media, we asked about this balance and received a number of responses from "our schools are overcrowded and failing," "falling apart," to "I'd rather the state figure out where to cut taxes." You've both promised to fund 2/3 of our schools and hold the line or cut taxes. How are you going to do both? Governor, we'll start with you.
First off, it's not just a question of if, we've actually done it. In the last budget, we gave the largest actual dollar investment in the K-12 education in the history of the state, as I mentioned. Tony himself called it a pro-kid budget. We did it while still lowering the property tax burden on the hardworking people of the state, on senior citizens and family farmers, on working families and others out there. And we're able to do that again. Remember, Tommy Thompson did this years ago. But the way you do it is by keeping in place our reforms that have saved school districts more than $3 billion. That's money that's gone directly in the classroom. Now, Tony has said repeatedly during the primary that he wants to undo those reforms. That would take money out of the classroom, away from students, and he'd allow your property taxes to go up to pay for it. Don't take my word on it. Look at the record. For years, Tony Evers has talked about needing to raise property taxes. For many, many years, we've been told a false premise in the media that you have to choose between good schools and lower property taxes. Tommy Thompson showed us years ago you can fund 2/3 and still lower the property tax burden on the hardworking people of the state. We did it in the last budget with historic actual dollar investments into schools, still lowering property taxes. And we're going to do it again going forward. That's important. Both of my kids, Matt and Alex, are here. They both went to public schools in Wauwatosa. My nieces are going to public schools today. I want every child to have access to great education, but I also want to make sure, particularly for our seniors, that we don't see the kind of property tax increases of 27% in the decade before we took office.
All right, Mr. Evers.
I certainly have a response. And I'll go back to the plagiarism issue just for a second. My definition of plagiarism is when Scott Walker takes my budget and calls it his own. That is my budget that he talks about this last year. But the bottom line is here, 2/3 funding. 2/3 funding, and we haven't got there in 8 years. I'm not sure why it's an election year thing, but it is an election year thing. You've had 8 years to do this, Scott Walker, and it hasn't happened yet. And in addition, during those 8 years, we've had over 1 million people in the state of Wisconsin, 1 million of our friends and relatives that have gone to referendum to raise their own taxes because Scott Walker has not provided enough revenue for local schools. It's pretty simple. The people of Wisconsin have spoken. They know that the last 8 years has not worked for our public schools. What I'm proposing is this, a $1.4 billion increase. That includes money for students with disabilities, a $600 million increase. That $1.4 billion additional dollars will also create opportunities for kids that need mental health services. We must move forward in the state of Wisconsin. We cannot continue to move backwards. The children of Wisconsin are counting on us to do this. My budget will not raise property taxes, and that is the truth.
Let's go to the next question. Lupita Montoto of La Movida, Spanish language radio in Madison. Lupita.
Gracias, Joe. Buenas noches, señores. Keeping on the topic of taxes, Mr. Evers, you have said that you want to cut taxes on the middle class by 10%.
Yes.
Governor Walker, you have said that you have lowered taxes for Wisconsinites. You suggested you will cut more in the future. At what point can the state no longer afford to cut taxes in order to remain financially responsible and able to pay for the projects and services Wisconsin residents and businesses rely on? Mr. Evers, you are first.
And that's a great question. My tax plan is this. I believe the state of Wisconsin's hardworking middle-class people have had a difficult time over the last 8 years. Lots of tax credits, as you've talked about, have gone to wealthy people. What my plan in this budget is this. We have to make sure that we treat the middle class fairly. So anybody that's making $100,000 or less will get a 10% income tax credit. In addition, $150,000 as families. That's a 10% credit. We have to make sure that the middle class in the state of Wisconsin stays strong, and this is one way to do this. But I'll tell you, when we talk about taxes, it is also about the fact, and I know Governor Walker talks about keeping taxes low, but here's the deal. Whether it's poor public policy about transportation, that has resulted in wheel taxes at the local level, user fees at the local level. That's a Scott Walker tax. In the education world, that's part of my world. Because of public policy decisions made by Governor Walker, what has happened? Over 1 million people in the state of Wisconsin have voted to raise their own taxes. That is a Scott Walker tax. Those are tax increases. We need to make sure that our system is fair, and I believe that 10% for the middle class is fair and it is doable, and I feel very strongly that the people of Wisconsin are with me on this one.
Let's go to the governor.
Well, years ago, I met a woman when I was county executive named Carol. She and her husband bought their home in 1953, and her husband sadly passed away in 1993. And since then, she's been able to stay in that home based on her pension, a little bit of a pension she got, Social Security, and for 55 years, she makes a little bit of money offering piano lessons to kids in the neighborhood. She's been pleased over the last 8 years to see her property taxes go down. Because before that, remember when Jim Doyle was governor, property taxes went up for that decade by about 27%. She's afraid now because she knows in the past Tony Evers has talked about raising property taxes over and over again. You can go back and look at the record out there. He's also talking about raising income taxes on manufacturers, people that create jobs and opportunity in the state, on farmers at a time when they certainly don't need a tax increase, and by raising the gas tax by as much as $1 a gallon. Right here in this town, he said the day after the primary, everything's on the table. The reporter said, what about $1 a gallon gas tax increase? He said everything's on the table. He'll tell you in a minute it's ridiculous, it's outrageous, but he has yet to tell us how much he's going to raise your taxes. And ladies and gentlemen, when someone from Madison tells you you're going to tell you after the election how much, look out. You better hold on to your wallets and purses because he's going to raise your taxes. I have shown repeatedly in the past that we can cut taxes on the hardworking people in the state, on working families, on senior citizens, on small business owners and family farmers. We've done it before and we'll do it again, just like Tommy did years ago when he funded 2/3 funding for schools and lowered property taxes.
We're going to go on to the next question, and that goes to Jessica Arp of WISC.
We'll move now to health care. An estimated 850,000 people in Wisconsin could lose their health care if pre-existing conditions aren't covered. The state is still a lead plaintiff in a lawsuit that would repeal the Affordable Care Act and take away the requirement for pre-existing condition coverage. Should the state drop out of that suit, and if the ACA is overturned, how can you guarantee the state will provide affordable coverage for pre-existing conditions, especially since in recent days, legislative leaders have raised questions about whether they'll support a new effort to cover this? We'll begin with Governor Walker.
Thanks. Well, let me be clear. We can protect people with pre-existing conditions in the state without protecting the failure that is Obamacare. Look, my wife who's here tonight is a type 1 diabetic. My mom, who's sitting right next to her, is a cancer survivor. My brother has a heart condition. Like a lot of you at home watching, when we talk about covering pre-existing conditions for our families, it's very personal. In Wisconsin, everyone living with pre-existing conditions is covered right now. And as long as I'm governor, it will always be covered in the state of Wisconsin. The difference between Tony and I is about Obamacare. Obamacare, which is failing. I remember earlier this year talking to Christine up in the Green Bay area. She told me under the Obamacare exchanges, her premiums were going up by almost $2,000 a month. A month. Can you imagine that? So while Washington failed to act and Obamacare premiums were going up, we put together a bipartisan solution. We got Democrats and Republicans on board to pass our health care stability plan. And just last week, we got news that, just as we predicted, premiums will go down starting in January by over 4% and by 10% from where they would have gone without our plan. That's a savings in premiums of almost $1,000. Now, Tony's plan is to do what Minnesota did years ago. In Minnesota, the premiums went up. In fact, 2 years ago this month, the Democrat governor of Minnesota said the Affordable Care Act is no longer affordable. We cannot do that in Wisconsin. Our plan lowers premiums, increases choices, and improves health care while we'll go ahead and cover pre-existing conditions.
Mr. Evers, your response?
That was a breathtaking soliloquy by the governor. Here's the deal, folks. Scott Walker was running for president not too long ago, and he decided that being against the Affordable Care Act was an important piece to be in order to succeed in that run. It didn't happen, and as a result of that decision, he has hurt the people of Wisconsin. He didn't, not only did he oppose Obamacare, but as a result of that opposition, he did not take the Medicaid expansion money that the Wisconsin citizens deserved. So he left hundreds of millions of dollars on the table. And the reason why Minnesota has lower rates than Wisconsin does is because, and I talked to a person early on the campaign, and he said, living in La Crosse, I'm going to continue working here, but I have to move to Minnesota to get their health care. Think about that. We're driving people out of the state. We can't do that. And in addition, Scott Walker, I'm going to take that Medicaid money and we're going to plow it into the system and make health care more affordable to all. But pre-existing conditions, there's 2.4 million people in the state of Wisconsin that care about that, including me. I'm a cancer survivor. Scott Walker is talking out of both sides of his mouth. He wants to save pre-existing conditions, but he's in federal court to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, which will get rid of those protections. So, Scott Walker, I've asked you a lot of times and you haven't answered. Why don't you drop out of that lawsuit?
Time is up. We're going to go to the next question with Leigh Mills.
I have a number of conversations on social media about mental health issues and how they impact area families. And I can tell you that I see the pain on the faces of our residents in their stories. In fact, we have a few to share with you here. Sherry from Madison says parents do not get services and cannot see their kids need help. And Danielle from Portage says the biggest issue is access to services. Now, a new study by the Wisconsin Policy Forum says a shortage of psychiatrists in the state leads to more than half of adults who need care not getting it. What is going wrong with the state, and what do you plan to do to fix it? Mr. Evers?
Well, we'll start out with my wheelhouse of K through 12 education. We put money in the last budget and for mental health services. And I'll tell you a quick story how that's played out in the state of Wisconsin. In Ashland School District, far north part of the state, they went to referendum. They modified some of their schools, but in every school building they put in therapy rooms so that people can receive that therapy, and bringing in practitioners from the area right in the schools, so it gets rid of that stigma. So we put that money in the budget and it's starting to work. We're asking for $64 million more in the state of Wisconsin. That's what we're going to be doing. In addition, it does have to do with taking that Medicaid money. I go talk to people all across the state of Wisconsin, practitioners as well as hospital executives. That money goes towards reimbursement of services. If we don't take that money, there won't be that high level of reimbursement that's needed, and as a result, people don't get services. It's pretty simple. I was just with the folks over at the Medical College of Wisconsin, and they're doing some very innovative things that the state needs to support. Having psychologists actually work with family practitioners in northern Wisconsin where those people don't exist. But if we want to have a healthy society, and especially in this area of mental health, we must make that commitment, and frankly, we must take that Medicaid money.
Governor Walker.
Thanks. Well, on most of this issue, I think Tony and I agree. The only distinction is what we just talked about. If you go back and look at PolitiFact, the facts are clear. When Minnesota took the expansion, premiums went up. The premiums didn't go down until this year when they adopted almost the identical plan to what I just signed earlier this year and will go into effect in January. So we don't want to have happen what Mark Dayton, the Democrat, said 2 years ago, and that is the Affordable Care Act is no longer affordable. But when it comes to mental health and services related to that, you're right. We actually do share a lot of the same beliefs. We took what was included in his budget request 2 years ago, because when I traveled the state listening to school officials at many of our town hall and listening sessions, that was an issue they said over and over again. They said we need it in the schools, because a few years before that, working with the legislature, we actually provided the largest increase in mental health services in more than a governor had done in more than 25 years. But it's still not enough. We've got to work together, not only in mental health, but on trauma-informed care. My wife, Tonette, is active in that, and we know dealing with trauma and adverse childhood experiences are incredibly important. We need to partner together with the state, with nonprofits, with school districts, and social service agencies all across the state of Wisconsin. And as you mentioned with some of those social media contacts out there, I know it's an incredibly personal issue. My father, who just recently passed away, was a minister for many, many years, and throughout that time he suffered with certain levels of mental illness as well, and it's a struggle for many people, and we've got to break that stigma so people can get the health care that they need to be healthy going forward.
Thank you, and thank both of you for keeping to time so well. We're impressed. Let's go on to the next question. Emilee Fannon.
Now we're transitioning to transportation. Polling shows a significant number of Wisconsinites are concerned about the quality of their roads and bridges. When it comes to solutions, Governor Walker, you've been clear that you won't raise the gas tax, and some ideas that you're open to. Mr. Evers, you said everything is on the table. What can you commit to this evening to help crumbling roads, and where will the money come from? Governor Walker.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the question. You mentioned polling. Actually, the latest Marquette poll showed that 70% of the people in the state believe their roads and locally are good, excellent, or fair. So only 30% actually think they're poor, and we need to work on that all over the state. It's why, since I've been governor, we've invested $24 billion into the state's transportation fund. Compare that to the $21 billion Jim Doyle put in. In fact, during his time, near the end of his tenure, Jim Doyle took over $1 billion and raided it out of the transportation fund. We had to pay that back in. Listening to local officials, as I once was in county government, they told us they needed a better partnership. And so in the last budget, we gave them the largest increase in 20 years for local governments to maintain their roads and their bridges. We're doing the same for our state highways. And you did mention, you're right, there is a contrast. Tony said the day after the primary, right here in Madison, everything's on the table. He was asked, does that include a $1 a gallon gas tax increase? He said everything's on the table. Now, in a minute, he'll say it's ridiculous, it's a lie, any number of other things out there. But in the end, he's not telling us what it is. If you don't have a plan till after the election, ladies and gentlemen, you need to be ready for a massive gas tax increase. $1 a gallon would be $1,200 for a typical family. Our approach going forward is to give local governments the largest increases they've ever had, maintain our state highways, and do it by not doing massive new interchanges in Milwaukee as the state has done over the past decade.
Thank you. What do you say, Mr. Evers?
Holy mackerel is what I say. Of course, the people of Wisconsin understand, except for Scott Walker keep repeating it, $1 a gallon is ridiculous. It's never going to happen. But let's go back to what doesn't work. Scott Walker's policies. Scott Walker has drawn a line in the sand around transportation, and as a result, our roads are crumbling. We have people in northern Wisconsin that are scraping the asphalt off the road, and they're driving on gravel roads. Think about the uniqueness of that idea. We have to change this in the state of Wisconsin. I was just with an engineer the other day, and she was telling me she's worked on bridge projects. She's afraid that there is going to be bridge calamity in this state. So as we sit around and talk about $1 a gallon and how ridiculous that is, our roads continue to crumble. Going forward, and I have to tell you this, $24 billion Governor Walker talked about, but if you put that against inflation, we're at the lowest level in 20 years. So going forward, what we're going to do is really roll up our sleeves. We're going to bring people together. Republicans and Democrats get this idea. The only person in the way of solving this infrastructure problem in the state of Wisconsin is Governor Walker. Going forward, I'm going to bring together Republicans and Democrats. We're not going to have a preconceived solution. I would prefer not to raise any taxes on this issue, but I'll be listening to the people that we're working with to solve this.
We'll move on to the next question. It goes to Lupita Montoto.
Now let's talk about the economy.
Great.
Wisconsin unemployment rate is at 3%. That is close to the lowest it has been for a decade. At the same time, a recent study by the United Way finds that 62% of Wisconsinites earn less than $20 an hour, and the percentage is higher for people of color. The report also reveals that many people with jobs still can't afford basic needs. What can the state do to improve conditions for all working people? Mr. Evers, you are first.
And thank you for bringing out that United Way study. That was an extraordinarily important issue for us. You think about it, there's over 670,000 families, working families in the state that can't afford the basics. That is not a robust economy, I can tell you that. So what I would like to do going forward is to make sure that we we have to change our focus. It can't be Hail Mary passes for one part of the state against the other. What we need to do is invest in those startups, those young entrepreneurs that absolutely exist all across the state of Wisconsin. We also have those 1 or 2 year businesses that are just growing and ready for help from the state. They're not looking for a handout. They're not looking for people to subsidize their workplace. But what they want is to make sure that they have an opportunity to get a loan at the local bank. We can do this. This has to be a 72-county situation. We will have a state agency that's in charge of this. We will get rid of WISC, and also we will be working so that regional folks can help us make those decisions. This is something that's exceedingly important for the state of Wisconsin. Every person in the state of Wisconsin has to feel that they have an opportunity to reach for the stars and get out of this situation where they're wondering where their next meal is going to be coming from, where childcare, how they're going to pay for childcare. We can change this. We just need a 72-county solution.
Governor Walker.
Right. Well, it's a great question and a great premise to begin with. We just saw the job numbers yesterday show that for the 8th month in a row, unemployment is at or below 3%. Prior to this year, it has never been below 3% in the state of Wisconsin. It's been 8 months in a row. Right now in 2018, we have more people in the workforce than ever before. And this morning, I looked on my phone to check our state website, jobcenterwisconsin.com. If you're looking for a job, check it out. There's more than 100,000 job openings on that site. That means there are technically more career opportunities in our state today than there are unemployed people in the state of Wisconsin. But we got to make sure that everyone's a part of that recovery. So I'm glad that unemployment's not only down statewide, it's at historic lows in county after county in every part of the state of Wisconsin. But we want to make sure that people get into the workforce. And it's not just about jobs. I'm pleased to say that wage growth outpaces nearly every other state in the nation this year as well. We want to continue to grow that. And so we've got big things as part of our plan to keep Wisconsin working for generations to come, like helping working families, many of whom, when they first have children, find it challenging to get back into the workforce. So we're providing a child care tax credit to make it a little bit easier to afford child care if either spouse wants to get back into the workforce. We're doing more things for people seeking public assistance to get them employability training, and for those who might potentially be suffering from addiction, get them the health care and the rehabilitation they need to get back up on their feet again. We can find a job for everyone in the state, but it doesn't happen if you're going to raise taxes like Tony Evers is talking about. We can get you back on your feet.
Thank you,
again.
Governor. Now, so we can cover more territory, we're going to ask you to shorten your answers a bit. These are the 60-second answers to some good questions. Let's start with Jessica Arp.
Shifting to education, Wisconsin's students, teachers, and administrators have a lot to be proud of. As both of you have pointed out in your ads and recent speeches, graduation rates and ACT scores are in the top 10 in the nation. But dig further and other statistics remain troubling, including startling differences between students of different income levels and ethnic groups in performance, and an increasing loss of young teachers from the profession. What is the #1 thing you think needs to be fixed about our public schools, and how would you make that change? This first to Governor Walker.
Sure. Well, thanks. As I mentioned, we have made historic investments, the largest actual dollar investment in state history, an extra $200 for every year for every student in every part of the state of Wisconsin. We've expanded and nearly tripled the amount of youth apprenticeships. We've done things like expand Fab Labs. We've done other things to make the connection between our technical colleges and an early start on our college in the University of Wisconsin system. But I think more than anything, it's not just about funding because, for example, Milwaukee, they outpaced by almost 40% the amount of funding versus the average school district in the state. It's about making sure those resources are targeted. And it does tie into the previous question about building the economy. If you've got communities that are where parents are working and communities are doing well and where kids aren't moving around, that actually helps deal with the achievement gap, something that Tony talked about when he first ran in 2009 as being one of his top priorities. It's still a challenge today, and we're willing to work together with people at the local level and in communities all across the state to make sure that every student graduates and every graduate has a game plan for their career.
Time is up. Mr. Evers.
Absolutely, and there is a reason why those achievement gaps still exist. It's because the budget that the urban school districts and those school districts that have lots of kids that struggle and need that extra lift haven't got it. There hasn't been an increase in special education funding for over a decade. We haven't had the commitment. I put things in my budget that I believe would close that achievement gap, and they've been taken out of the budget. So here's the other problem here. Scott Walker, when he first came to office, he said, we're going to divide and conquer this state. And one of the ways we do this is to make teachers and other public employees the enemy. Well, I can tell you as an administrator all across the state and just common sense, if you're in the public sector or private sector, making the workers that actually do the work your enemy, you're not going to succeed. So going forward, we're going to make sure that we have a robust budget that really impacts those achievement gaps and makes it better for the life of the kids in the state.
Thank you. Emilee Fannon.
Staying on education. Many students are struggling with student debt. Among the almost 8,000 Wisconsin DACA students, their problem is intensified because they cannot qualify for in-state tuition, which 18 other states provide. Should DACA students get in-state tuition, and what can we do for all student loan debt? Mr. Evers.
Yes, and here's what I would do. I would propose or support legislation that allowed DACA students to be part of, to have in-state tuition. We have to make sure that we recognize how important our young people are, and we can do that. I visit schools all the time, and I hear young people are afraid, young Latino people are afraid that they're going to be ripped apart, their parents are going to be ripped away from them. We cannot allow that to happen in the state. That is just not right. Now, as it relates to tuition and how high it is, one of the problems is, frankly, is that Scott Walker took over $200 million, I think it's $250 million, out of the higher education budget. We have to fund the best economic driver that we have in the state of Wisconsin, and that's our University of Wisconsin system. We have to make sure that our young people have the opportunity to refinance loans in a way that works, not pretend ways that like we have now. I support the legislation in the budget in the legislature right now to do that.
Governor?
Well, I'm pleased that the University of Wisconsin has the largest budget they've ever had in state history. But I know over the years it's been difficult to afford the high cost of higher education. In the decade before our freeze, tuition went up 118%. And as parents, Tonette and I knew that our kids just graduated a few years ago. In fact, our youngest is a graduate of the University of Wisconsin. So I'm proud that we froze tuition 6 years in a row, and I want to continue to freeze tuition for the next 4 years. I also increased needs-based financial assistance for all of our colleges and universities, public and private in the state, so that more kids and their families could afford to send them to school. Now, going forward, we're a nation based on immigrants, but we're also a nation based on laws. So we've got to make sure folks in Washington change the laws so we can adjust things going forward. But when it comes to student loan debt, we've worked with the UW Credit Union to provide a competitive place, because the state shouldn't be a bank. UW Credit Union allows access to any student from this state to refinance their student loan at rates, I should say, that are as competitive or better than other states who've done it on their own.
Governor, your time is up, and the first part of the question specifically asked whether DACA students should be entitled to in-state tuition as they are in several other states. Could you address that, please, in 30 seconds?
Sure. And Jill, what I was saying about that is we're a nation of immigrants and a nation of laws. The laws laws are very clear at the federal level. They need to be changed at the federal level. From our standpoint, we want to make college affordable for everyone out there, which is why, as I mentioned, we're talking about needs-based financial assistance, which we provide to students all across the state, as well as freezing tuition to make it more affordable.
So that was a yes or a no on in-state tuition?
Well, I said the laws. The laws are very clear at the federal level. We cannot do that without being in violation of federal laws.
We'll go on. The next question goes to Jessica Arp.
We'll continue talking a bit here about immigration and agriculture. Walk onto many dairy farms in Wisconsin and you will find a melting pot in the milking parlor. Studies show more than half of the labor force are immigrants. Those workers and the farmers who employ them live in fear of increased deportation actions, as we saw in Wisconsin just weeks ago, and what that could mean to the state's $43 billion dairy industry. Do you believe immigrant labor should remain a part of Wisconsin's dairy industry, and what would you push for as governor? Governor Walker, we begin with you.
Well, again, as I mentioned, we're a nation both of immigrants and of laws. When I was looking through some of my father's papers recently after his passing, I saw some of the details about some of our ancestors. Thomas Llewellyn, who my father's first name was Llewellyn, came from South Central Wales, where his father was a miner, and he came here to America as a blacksmith because he wanted to pursue freedom and opportunities like so many immigrants do today. But he also came because this was a nation of laws and a stable government. And so we need to uphold those laws. And Jessica, that question probably would be best suited for the U.S. Senate U.S. Senate debate, I should say, because those laws are addressed at the federal level. Do I think we should have open to immigrants here in the state, whether it deals with our dairy industry or anybody else? Yeah. For legal immigration in the state of Wisconsin, we need people to come in. We now have more people in the workforce than we've ever had before in the state's history. We not only need to keep our graduates here, we need to bring people in from other states and other places to help us grow the economy.
Mr. Evers?
Well, first of all, we heard that Governor Walker said no to the DACA kids. And as far as in-state tuition, other states have done it, and under the same circumstances. But what concerns me the most is we continue to pass on this issue with our president. And this campaign is not about Donald Trump. It's about Scott Walker and Tony Evers. But it is about the governor's ability to call out bad public policy at the national level. When young people were being ripped away from their parents at the border, and people asked the governor of Wisconsin whether he thought about that, and he said it's a federal issue. Well, it's not. It's a human issue. It's a human issue, and the governor of the state of Wisconsin needs to weigh in on that. The governor of Wisconsin has to weigh in on the issue of immigration. I will work hard. We have to have a comprehensive reform in the state. We must be able to do that. In addition, I would provide driver's permits for people that are working in Wisconsin and
Time
are
is up,
undocumented.
and that goes to our next question, Lupita Montoto.
And keeping on immigration. So many of my radio station listeners want me to ask you this question about driver's license. Those applying for a driver's license in Wisconsin are currently required to show proof of citizenship. Should there be a way to license and regulate undocumented immigrants who drive on Wisconsin's roads? If not, why not? If so, how and when will it be done? Governor Walker, you are first.
Well, thank you. And again, as I talked about before, we're a nation of immigrants, but we're also a nation of laws. And that clearly puts us in violation of the federal law. That's the reason why we need federal officials to stand up and make positive affirmative changes that allow for legal immigration into the state from anywhere around the world. And the reason we need to do that is precisely what I mentioned in the last question, and the answer to the last question, which is we have more people in the workforce in this state than ever before in our history. We need to bring more people into the state to work. It's why we're out actively recruiting people, whether it's Midwest millennials, whether it's alumni coming back from our public and private institutions, or whether it's of late, we're out recruiting veterans at 16 different military bases around the world. And one of the things I'm particularly proud of is we're the #1 state in America for veterans benefits. All those things are about bringing people into the state of Wisconsin. But we need to make sure that we're in compliance with federal law, and that means to address issues like this, we need the federal government to make those changes.
Mr. Evers.
My father-in-law came from Holland, farmed in Sheboygan County for years, and then worked at Kohler Company. And then the next wave of immigrants came, and then the next wave of immigrants. I can tell you that that is going to happen as long as I'm alive in the state of Wisconsin, or any one of us. We have to accept that fact. So, do I think that we should have driver permits for undocumented folks that are working in the state of Wisconsin? The answer is yes. Undocumented folks are working hard at jobs all across the state of Wisconsin, paying taxes, paying into Social Security. They should have the opportunity, to have permits, but the state of Wisconsin also has the opportunity to hire good workers. In addition, when you get that permit, you have to learn how to drive safely in Wisconsin. To me, it wins for the economy, and it wins for the workers, and it wins for the people of Wisconsin.
Time's up. We'll go to the next question, and that's Leigh Mills.
Let's talk about drunken driving and first offense criminality. Drunken drivers kill or injure someone every 3 hours in this state, according to the DOT. And yet Wisconsin is the only state in the country that doesn't consider a first offense drunken driving charge a crime. We talked about this on social media, and Christine from Madison represents a lot of the comments we saw. She said, if God forbid you lose a member or two of your family to drunk drivers, then maybe you may think Wisconsin drunk driving laws need to be changed too. How would each of you respond to Christine? Mr. Evers, we'll start with you.
Well, first of all, I'll just talk in a different way. Our work in our schools around alcohol and other drug abuse has been very successful. We're seeing a sharp decline in a number of uses of drugs and uses of alcohol also, and less binge drinking also. So the good news is that we're starting to corral this problem that we have in Wisconsin. Do I think drunk driving is a serious offense? Absolutely, and I believe there's ways that we can get there. Yes, it should be a very stern issue first time around. There's no question about that. I would support that, but we also have to make sure, just throwing people into the criminal justice system is not going to solve their problem. If it's a serious offense, or viewed as a serious offense, we have to provide alcohol and other drug abuse. We have proposals. We have to provide mental health services. We just can't incarcerate people and think they're going to get better. That's where my concern is.
Governor?
Well, this is a very serious issue, and has been for years. I remember when I was first in the state legislature from Wauwatosa, the Port family, and they just had a horrible case where a family member, I think was, if I remember right, I think the individual who killed their family member had been a repeat offender. I think it was 9 times. So one of the things I'm particularly proud of is having worked with Alberta Darling and Jim Opp, and really a bipartisan group to further criminalize multiple repeat offenders, because at some point, Tony, you're right, we've got to provide help and assistance, but at some point, when people are out multiple times on the road with drunk driving offense, that is putting a risk to all of us in society out there. And beyond that, it's part of the reasons why I've raised concerns after talking to law enforcement and public health officials about legalizing marijuana. I just saw a report from Canada that said, I believe in Canada now, they actually see a higher number of vehicle-related crashes related to drug as opposed to alcohol. We need to make sure we don't have any impaired driving, whether it's alcohol-related or drug-related as well.
Governor, I think the question was first offense criminality as opposed to civil.
Right, and my point on that is we need to go after not so much the first offenders, although we need to make it a taboo for anyone to be driving under the influence, be it from alcohol or drugs or anything else. But where the biggest threat has been, and why we cracked down on that and need to do even more, is on people who are out over and over and over again.
So you would or wouldn't change the law on the first offense?
No, I don't think Tony said that either. I don't think either of us said that.
Mr. Evers, just to be clear.
I would look at making it criminal, but it would have to be tied with ways to not just incarcerate people, but to help them return to society.
Thank you both for that clarification. Jessica Arp.
Let's come back to agriculture for a moment. Wisconsin, the dairy state, has lost more than 500 farms across the state this year. Farmers say record low prices for milk are driving them out of business. A tentative new trade deal with Canada and Mexico promises to open new markets for dairy farmers, but a serious problem remains. There is simply too much milk being produced, which the state in recent years has encouraged. As governor, how would you remedy the issue of too much milk production, and what steps can be taken in Wisconsin to save family farms? Governor, we begin with you.
Great. Thanks, Jessica. Well, this is a serious issue. We've talked about it for some time. I was out the World Dairy Expo, was just out with a bunch of farm groups who endorsed this yesterday in Manitowoc County. I know, having grown up with a mom who grew up on a farm, that farming is more than just a job. It's a way of life for a lot of our farm families, and they're hurting. And I was happy to work with the president a year and a half ago to say that the problems in Canada were causing a lot of our farmers to get cut off from groups like Grassland. And so I was so pleased that the president held out to the very end to make sure those changes were made to open up more markets. Simply put, actually in one way, we got to open not only more markets, but all of you at home could eat more cereal and eat more cheese. Quite frankly, that's part of the challenge out there. Not enough people are eating cereal out there, and so we've got to find other ways to open up markets around the world. We've been aggressive in working with Sheila Harsdorf and our team at the Wisconsin Department of Ag, Trade, and Consumer Protection. But the last thing we want to do is raise taxes on farmers. Tony Evers is talking about raising taxes on farmers and manufacturers. I don't care what size they are. The last thing they need at a time like this is raising taxes.
I'm sure glad you brought that up, so I have a chance to rebut that. I was trying to do that before. My tax plan is going to work well for farmers in the state of Wisconsin. It's a 10% tax cut, and for those that are getting the agriculture rebate, up to $300,000, and there's not many farmers in the state of Wisconsin that will pass that limit. So I'm confident that we're going to protect those farmers. Now, going forward, so let's set that aside as another inaccuracy for the governor. Ag policy in the state has been horrible. We have encouraged people to produce and produce and produce, and to their ultimate credit, the farmers of Wisconsin have done exactly that. Now we're in a situation where we have an overabundance. We need a Department of Agriculture that works to help farmers not only find foreign markets. There's going to be a limited end on that. But we also have to help them diversify, making sure that they have the opportunities to look at different ways to raise crops, have the University of Wisconsin system be their partner.
Thank you. Let's go to Lupita Montoto. These are the 30-second responses, and there is not a rebuttal on those. So let's go to the question.
And the topic is marijuana. And yes, Canada just legalized marijuana for adults, with regulations. In Wisconsin, 16 counties have marijuana referendum questions on their ballots. Should any form of marijuana use be legalized in Wisconsin? This question is for both of you. Mr. Evers, you are first.
Yes. As a cancer survivor, I absolutely believe that we must have, physicians must have the ability to use cannabis in treatments. And so that is a given. The second thing is we have to decriminalize the use of marijuana. We have people that are suffering mightily because they broke that law. Third of all, we're having referendums all over the state, and we continue to do it. I'm willing to take a look at that and at the results of those referenda and possibly support
Governor Walker.
The legalization.
Well, for years I've listened to public health officials and law enforcement officials, even here in Dane County, who've pleaded with us not to legalize marijuana because they're concerned it's a gateway drug to other drugs. And we've seen the addictions with opioids, with heroin, with meth in certain parts of the state. So yeah, per your point about the juice, we've actually used that. We've modified that multiple times to help for kids with seizures. We've legalized industrial hemp, which helps many of our farmers. But outright legalization, I think from the folks in law enforcement, public health, they've said that would be a big problem.
Let's go to Leigh Mills.
If you haven't noticed, this is a panel made up entirely of women. And many call this the year of the woman, both in candidates and voters. To both of you, starting with Governor Walker, why should women vote for you?
Well, I think for the same reason men should. For us, we offer a plan to keep moving the state forward. You know, years ago, unemployment was at 9.3%. As Tonette and I talked about before, we were afraid our kids weren't even going to have a job, let alone a career when they graduated from school. We're offering a plan to keep our graduates here, to make sure that every student graduates, that every graduate has a game plan for their career, and that we keep our graduates here in the state of Wisconsin. We want to make it easier for working families to re-enter the workforce and to keep taxes down while improving quality for our education system in the state.
Thank you, Governor. Mr. Evers.
Women should vote for me for several reasons, but education is one. I know how important solid education is for moms and dads. It's been something that's been very important to Kathy and our 3 children. So we're going to have an education system we can be proud of. But the other issue is around health. Women's health has been under attack in the state of Wisconsin. We've been taking away all sorts of rights and responsibilities that should be the decision of a woman and her physician.
That takes us to your closing statements. And by the coin toss, Mr. Evers, you are first with a 2-minute close.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the group here for the great opportunity to answer these questions. And also the viewing audience. It's been a pleasure for me to talk about my vision for the future of the state of Wisconsin. And I'm hoping that the Brewers are ahead at this point in time. Going forward, you've seen a fundamental difference between Governor Walker and myself. Governor Walker has been a career politician. I've been a lifelong educator. As a career politician, he has put his own political interests ahead of the people of Wisconsin. It's played out in a negative way. We've seen rising health care costs, less accessibility to health care. We've seen our roads crumbling, and frankly, we've seen education decimated in a way that we would never have imagined. In turn, I'm an educator, and I bring people together. That's what I think is important. Kathy and I have lived all across the state of Wisconsin, and believe me, we have seen more opportunities for people to be united than they are to be divided. And that's what we need to think about in the state of Wisconsin. I truly believe that as governor of the state of Wisconsin, I will bring people together. And that's not just an empty phrase. People of Wisconsin are sick of the political rancor that we hear every single day. We're going to move this state forward and really do the job that we can do by bringing people together. We can have the best health care possible. We can have a great education system. We can have a transportation a system that works, that gets people from point A to point B without being endangered. We can do this work in the state of Wisconsin, and I'm so happy to be here tonight to talk to you about that. Please check out my website, tonyevers.com/plan, for other information about my plans. And thank you so much. I would appreciate your support.
Your time is up. Governor, your turn, 2 minutes.
Well, thanks. And, this election's not about me. It's not even about Tony. It's about all of you. As I traveled the state, one of the things I love best is seeing how proud people are of their families and of their homes. I love seeing how proud people are of their employers and their small businesses and farms. I love seeing how proud people are of their schools and their colleges, their clinics and hospitals. I love seeing how proud people are of their places of worship and their nonprofit organizations. I love seeing how proud people are of their communities and of our state. We are Wisconsin proud. I gotta tell you, I'm proud to be your governor. I'm proud of what we've done together over the past 8 years to turn this state around. Remember back 8 years ago, this state was suffering. It was a mess. We had double-digit tax increases, billion-dollar budget deficits, and record job loss. Now we have more people working than ever before. 8 consecutive months in a row of record low unemployment. Some of the best schools in the nation. And our property taxes are lower today on working families and small business owners, senior citizens, family farmers than they were before. Now, looking ahead, we have a plan to build off that success. As the first term was about jobs, now it's about workforce, and for the next 4 years, we'd like to finish the job by growing our workforce, by making sure that every one of our students graduates, and that every graduate has a game plan for success with a career, whether it's through an apprenticeship, a technical college degree, or an undergraduate or master's level degree. There's a place for every student to have a successful career here, and we want to keep all of our graduates in the state and attract new talent to the state of Wisconsin as well. That's what's exciting about the future. And I'd love the opportunity to finish the job over the next 4 years as your governor. But to do that, I need your help. I need your support. I need your prayers. And tonight, I'm asking for your vote on November 6th so we can keep Wisconsin working for generations to come. Thank you very much.
Thanks to our candidates, to our panelists, and now let's turn to WBA President and CEO Michelle Vetterkind.
For for joining us for tonight's debate, an opportunity for Wisconsin citizens to hear from the leading gubernatorial candidates in a nonpartisan forum. This debate has been sponsored by our WBA Foundation through a grant from the Wisconsin Association of Independent Colleges and Universities. Our sincere thanks to Wisconsin radio and TV stations who work together to produce and air this broadcast, to the candidates, our moderator, and our panelists. Election Day is Tuesday, November 6th. Exercise your right as an American and vote. As always, WBA member stations will be on duty to bring you the results.
With the midterm elections just days away,